My son kept me in a chemical prison for 6 months, broadcasting my fake dementia to millions of strangers and profiting off every tear he shed on camera. He thought I was a hollow shell, a living legend whose mind had finally burned out. He was wrong. It all ended the day I decided to stop drinking his special tea and started watching him from behind the mask of a broken man. My name is Arthur, and for 35 years, I was the man this city called when the world was on fire. As a fire captain, I carried people out of hell and never blinked. I was a name that stood for strength and integrity. When I retired, I thought my biggest challenge would be boredom. Then my son Julian, the golden boy with the expensive degree and the hollow smile, insisted I move in with him. He said I deserved a break, that he wanted to take care of the man who had spent his life taking care of everyone else. I was so proud of the man he had become. I didn't realize I was moving into a trap. The decline was subtle at first. A little bit of confusion here, a missed appointment there. I felt heavy, like my brain was wrapped in wet wool. Julian was always there with a warm smile and a cup of herbal tea, telling me it was just the stress of retirement. But the fog grew thicker every day. Soon, I couldn't remember what I had for breakfast. I stopped being Arthur the hero and became Arthur the burden. I didn't realize that every time I stumbled or forgot a word, Julian's phone was tucked in his pocket, recording. He wasn't mourning my mind. He was documenting my destruction. He was building a brand out of my tragedy, and I was too drugged to even see the lens. Julian's kindness felt like a velvet noose tightening around my neck every single day. He had turned my life into a scripted reality show, where I was the tragic lead who didn't even know his lines. He started telling our neighbors and my old colleagues that I was having difficult episodes. He told them I was becoming aggressive, a danger to myself, which was a lie that cut deeper than any physical wound. People I had known for 40 years stopped calling. They didn't want to see the quote. When I remember sitting in the recliner, the one Julian bought to replace my old comfortable leather chair, I felt like I was floating in a dark ocean, unable to reach the shore. Julian would walk into the room, his phone already recording, and his voice would transform. It became high-pitched and dripping with a fake, shaky sympathy that made my skin crawl. Quote 2. He would whisper to his thousands of followers. He would lean in and wipe a smudge of food from my chin, a smudge he had put there himself just moments before. I wanted to swat his hand away, to tell him to get that damn camera out of my face, but the drugs in my system made my limbs feel like they were made of lead. I was a prisoner in my own body, watching my son use my medals and my uniform as props in a digital circus. He had a routine. The quote 4 came twice a day in a cup of sweet peppermint tea. He would stand there, watching me swallow every drop, his eyes cold and calculating. There was no love in those eyes, only the look of a businessman checking on an investment. I was no longer a father to him. I was a brand. I was a tax-deductible asset that was funding his designer suits and his late-night parties while I sat in the dark, wondering if I would ever see the sun clearly again. One evening, Julian made a strategic mistake. He left his tablet unlocked on the coffee table while he stepped away to take what sounded like a very expensive business call. For a brief moment, the fog in my brain parted just enough for a spark of my old investigator's instinct to flare up. I leaned forward, my hands shaking like dry leaves, and tapped the screen. What I saw made my blood turn to ice. It was his social media page. The profile picture was a photo of us from years ago, but the recent content was a nightmare. I watched a video he had posted just an hour ago. There I was, slumped in my chair, a string of drool hitting my shirt, my eyes staring at nothing. The caption read, "Another heartbreaking day. The hero of our city is slipping away, but I will stay by his side until the very end. Your donations to Arthur's legacy help me provide the 24-hour care he needs. We are in this together." I scrolled through the comments. Thousands of people were calling Julian a saint. "You're an angel," one wrote. "Arthur is so lucky to have a son like you," said another. Then I saw the link to the foundation's website. The ticker at the bottom showed a total of over $2 million raised in just 6 months. $2 million for a legacy that was being built on my public humiliation and systematic destruction. Then I heard his footsteps. I leaned back and closed my eyes, pretending to be asleep. Julian picked up the tablet and let out a cold, sharp laugh. "Do you have any idea how much you're worth to me like this, old man?" he muttered, his voice devoid of any warmth. He thought I was too far gone to hear him, let alone understand. "If you were healthy, you'd just be a retired captain with a boring pension. But like this, you're a gold mine. You're the best investment I ever made." He leaned over and pinched my arm, hard, just to see if I'd react. I forced myself to stay still, even as the pain spiked. He then adjusted my collar and wiped my face with a silk handkerchief, preparing his lighting for the next update. I realized then that my son wasn't just waiting for me to die. He was keeping me in a living grave to fund his lifestyle. The betrayal was a physical weight, heavier than any beam I had ever lifted in a burning building. I wasn't just a father anymore. I was a hostage. The next morning, Julian brought me my medicine with his usual fake enthusiasm. "Time for your tea, Dad. It helps you stay calm," he said, his eyes scanning the room as if checking for any signs of rebellion. He placed the steaming mug in my trembling hands and watched me. I didn't drink. I just held it, letting the heat seep into my palms. Luckily, a courier rang the doorbell, and Julian cursed under his breath, turning away to head to the front door. This was my chance. I sat next to a large, expensive-looking potted palm that Julian had bought to make the living room look better for his videos. I leaned over, my muscles screaming from the lack of use, and poured the dark, bitter liquid into the soil. I quickly wiped the rim of the mug and set it back on the table. When Julian returned, he glanced at the empty cup and smirked. He whispered, patting my shoulder before leaving to take another call. I waited. 1 hour. 2. Usually by this time, I would be drifting into a stupor where faces blurred and voices felt like they were coming from underwater. But today, the world stayed sharp. The edges of the furniture didn't melt. The clock on the wall didn't turn into a swirling mess. For the first time in months, I could think. I could remember. I looked at the palm tree. Its leaves were already starting to droop, as if the poison intended for me was too much for even a plant to handle. I felt a surge of rage so intense it made my heart hammer against my ribs. I wasn't sick. I wasn't dying. I was being chemically erased. I looked around the room and saw the tripod, the ring light, and the expensive camera gear tucked in the corner. My home had been turned into a studio, and I was the puppet. I realized I couldn't just stand up and walk out. Julian was younger, stronger, and he had the world convinced I was insane. If I fought him now, he'd just call the paramedics and have me committed. I had to be smarter. I had to play the part of the vegetable while I planned his downfall. I closed my eyes as I heard him coming back, forcing my breathing to slow down, hiding the fire that was finally burning in my soul again. I waited until I heard the heavy, rhythmic snoring coming from Julian's master suite. He had spent the evening celebrating a massive breakthrough in donations, which usually meant he had polished off a bottle of expensive scotch. My legs felt like they were made of glass, but I managed to stand. Slowly, I navigated the hallway, using the walls for support. I reached his home office, a room I was strictly forbidden from entering. The door creaked, a sound that felt like a gunshot in the silent house. I froze, holding my breath, but the snoring continued. I slipped inside and turned on a small desk lamp. The room was a monument to ego. Photos of Julian accepting fake awards and glossy brochures for Arthur's legacy were everywhere. I sat in his leather chair and began to dig through the stacks of paper. I didn't need to be a forensic accountant to see the truth. I found a hidden ledger tucked inside a folder labeled, quote, 18. It wasn't taxes. It was a list of transfers. Every cent that kind-hearted people had donated to save the city's hero was being siphoned off. I saw payments for a lease on a Ferrari, thousands spent at high-end casinos, and credit card bills that would make a millionaire wince. Not a single dollar had gone to the veterans he claimed to support. There was a specific file marked, quote, 20. It contained the guest list, the mayor, the police chief, the district attorney. It also contained the script for the evening. Julian planned to announce my, quote, 21 during the event, effectively locking me away forever, while he stayed in control of the foundation. I found a USB drive labeled, quote, 22. When I plugged it into his laptop, I saw a video of myself, but not the one he showed the public. It was raw footage of him laughing at me, waving a pill bottle in front of my face and saying, quote, 23. My hands shook with a rage I hadn't felt since my days in the fire service. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to burn his world to the ground. The next 7 days were a living nightmare. Every morning, Julian would hand me that poisoned tea, and every morning I found a way to dispose of it, in the garden, down the drain when he turned his back, or even spitting it back into the cup when he went to answer his phone. My body was getting stronger and my mind sharper, but I had to keep the mask on. I had to look like a man whose soul had already left the building. Julian started treating me like a piece of furniture. One afternoon, he sat on the edge of my bed, eating a steak that smelled like heaven, while he forced me to eat some bland, gray mush he'd bought in a can. He said, chewing loudly. He laughed and wiped his greasy fingers on my favorite old fire department sweatshirt. I stared through him, keeping my eyes glazed and my mouth slightly open. Inside, I was memorizing every word, every sneer. I was a hunter, waiting in the tall grass. My heart was pounding so hard, I was afraid he could see it through my shirt. But he was too blinded by his own greed to notice. He didn't see the man who had survived backdrafts and collapsing buildings. He just saw a prop for his big night. He had no idea that while he was planning his coronation, I was planning his absolute destruction. The day before the tribute gala, Julian left to oversee the final decorations at the Grand Hotel. He was in high spirits, humming a tune as he checked his reflection in the mirror. "Tomorrow is the big day, Dad," he said, patting my cheek with a condescending smirk. "The day everyone finally sees how much I've sacrificed for you." As soon as his car pulled out of the driveway, I dropped the lost look. I had exactly 90 minutes. I headed to the garage. Tucked behind my old workbench was an emergency bag I'd kept since my days at the fire station. Inside was an old cell phone I'd kept for emergencies. My fingers felt stiff, but my mind was like a steel trap as I dialed a number I knew by heart. "Miller?" a gravelly voice answered. It was Bill Miller, the current police chief, and my closest friend for 30 years. "Bill, it's Arthur. Do not speak. Just listen," I whispered, my voice sounding stronger than it had in months. I told him everything, the forced medication, the fake foundation, and the hidden ledger. I could hear Bill's breathing hitch on the other end. He didn't ask a million questions. He knew my voice too well to doubt me. After the call, I crept back into Julian's office. The gold-plated USB drive was sitting on his desk. It was the quote 34 that was supposed to make the whole room weep. I plugged it into his computer. I didn't delete his video. I edited it. I kept the first minute of sentimental garbage, the slow-motion shots of me in uniform, and the soft piano music. But then, I spliced in the secret recording of Julian laughing while he admitted to drugging me. I added the scans of the ledger showing the Ferrari payments. I saved the file and put the drive back exactly where I found it. The bomb was primed. Now, I just had to wait for the spark. The night of the gala arrived. The air in the Grand Hotel ballroom was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the suffocating stench of hypocrisy. Julian had me dressed in a tailored tuxedo, my medals pinned to my chest like decorations on a mannequin. He pushed my wheelchair through the crowd, stopping every few feet to receive a pat on the back or a sympathetic handshake. "He's having a quiet night," Julian would whisper, his eyes performing a masterful dance of sadness. But I know he feels the love in this room. The room was filled with the city's elite. I saw the mayor, the judges I used to work with, and my old fire crew. I kept my head tilted to the side, my gaze fixed on a spot on the floor, pretending to be 1,000 miles away. Every time Julian touched my shoulder to show me off, I felt a jolt of electricity. It wasn't fear. It was the cold, hard patience of a man who had waited for the perfect moment to strike. Julian was in his element. He moved from table to table, charming donors and accepting praise for his selfless devotion. He looked like a king about to be crowned. He had no idea that Chief Miller was standing near the back exit, watching his every move with a look of controlled fury. I caught Bill's eye for a split second, a tiny nod that no one else noticed. The perimeter was set. Finally, the lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the center stage, and the master of ceremonies announced the man of the hour. Julian walked up the stairs, his chest puffed out, radiating confidence. "Tonight," he began, his voice cracking with rehearsed emotion, "we honor not just a hero, but a father, a man who gave everything to this city, and a man I am proud to protect in his hour of need." He signaled to the tech booth. "Before I accept this award on his behalf, please look at the screen to see the journey we've been on." The piano music started. Soft, weeping chords filled the hall. Julian turned to the screen, a smug smile playing on his lips, waiting for the applause. He had no idea the file he had handed over wasn't the one he had prepared. The fuse was lit. The screen flickered to life. The first minute was exactly what Julian expected, a montage of my firefighting days, set to heart-wrenching music. The audience was silent, some dabbing their eyes. Julian stood at the podium, looking humble and heroic. Then, the music cut out with a sharp screech. The screen went black for a second before a grainy, hidden camera video appeared. It was the footage from his office. The room gasped as they saw Julian, glass of scotch in hand, laughing as he tossed a pill bottle onto his desk. His voice echoed through the massive speakers, clear as a bell. The ballroom went deathly silent. Julian's face turned a ghostly shade of white. He lunged toward the tech booth, screaming for them to turn it off. But the screen shifted to the ledger, the stolen millions, the casino debts, the fraud. Julian stammered into the microphone, his voice high and panicked. That's when I did it. I placed my hands on the armrests of the wheelchair. I felt the strength in my legs, fueled by months of suppressed rage. I stood up. Slowly at first, then straight and tall, the way a captain stands. The sound of 400 people catching their breath at once was louder than any explosion I'd ever heard. I walked toward the microphone, my footsteps heavy and deliberate. Julian backed away, tripping over his own feet, his eyes wide with pure, unadulterated terror. He looked at me like he was seeing a ghost. I grabbed the microphone from his trembling hand. My voice didn't shake. It was the voice that had commanded fire crews through smoke and fire for decades. "My son is right about one thing," I said, looking directly into the camera. "A hero is being revealed tonight, but it's not him. And Julian, since you love the law so much, I think it's time you heard your rights." Chief Miller and his officers stepped out of the shadows, handcuffs gleaming under the stage lights. The triumph of spirit was over. My life was just beginning. The silence that followed Julian being led away in handcuffs was the loudest sound I had ever heard. The courtroom battles that followed were grueling, but with the evidence I had gathered and the testimony of my old friends, justice was swift. The Arthur's Legacy Foundation was liquidated, and every remaining cent was returned to the veterans and charities my son had tried to rob. I didn't want a dime of that tainted money. I used my own pension to move into a modest house by the lake, far away from the cameras and the noise of the city. It has been a year since that night. I spend my mornings rowing on the water and my afternoons volunteering at the local fire academy, teaching the new recruits that true strength isn't about muscle, it's about character. My mind is sharp, my body is healthy, and for the first time in a long time, I can look in the mirror and see the man I used to be. I lost a son that night, but I found my soul again. Julian is serving a lengthy sentence for fraud and elder abuse, and while a part of me grieves for the boy he once was, the man I am now knows that some fires have to be allowed to burn out, so that something better can grow in the ashes. I am 67 years old, and I am finally living my best life. I've realized that being a legend doesn't matter nearly as much as being free. I chose to expose my own flesh and blood to protect my integrity and the people he was hurting. But now I have to ask you, did I go too far? He was my only son, and I destroyed his life in front of the entire world. Should I have handled it privately, or was a public reckoning the only way to truly stop him? What would you have done if you found out your own child was using you like a puppet? If you found this story powerful, please hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one of them. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss these incredible journeys of betrayal and justice. Your support means everything. The end. Thank you for listening.